Hi, good morning everyone. Thank you so much for such a lovely introduction. Today I will be talking about my life story, which is called Connecting the Dots. So in school, I was always known as a child who would get in trouble for doing too much, talking too much, jumping too much, getting too much stationery for my art classes, and also writing really long answers and then arguing too much to defend them as well. So I have just gotten in trouble for being that kid who's always too excited about doing these things. And most of my notebooks would have my rough work transitioning into scribbles and doodles. All in all, it was a mess. Like, you could tell I was a really distracted child. I mean, I still am. But I think that is what has helped me get here. So, in my life, I've had a fair number of incidents that have shaped me and helped me become the person I am today. It has been a series of fortunate and a few unfortunate events, which I will be talking about today. So I hope you can connect the dots as you listen to my life story. Now, let's look at it this way. Your brain is a factory with constant emissions, for the lack of a better word, called brain farts. And your brain cells are actually the labor that you employ to get the work done. Now, just like any other machine or any other factory, we come with default factory settings, just like, say, MS Word. And you use these default factory settings for if you want to write something as boring as a business letter. Similarly, our brain comes with wired if and then settings. If hungry, then eat. If tired, then sleep. And if lonely, then, I don't know, install Tinder or something. So these if and then mechanisms actually help us create and layer these processes one by one to release these emissions. And along this way, while we connect the dots, while our brain cells are employed in actually generating these creative ideas, your brain factory can often go out of order. Now, during my journey, I've had a few roadblocks, which I will be talking about. And I will also be talking about my art, which has given me the courage to speak about this at the stage today. Now, our human brain is what separates us from the species that exist on planet Earth. We are the only species who come with a set of 3 superpowers. We, as humans, can believe, we can imagine, and we can wonder. The fact that something that I'll talk about can only exist in our brains and nowhere tangibly in this room is in fact pretty amazing. The fact when I tell you about a half horse and a half human, and the fact that you know exactly what I'm talking about, all of us have the exact same picture in our heads, is pretty amazing. And these superpowers actually help us bring these creative ideas to life, actually help us bring our stories to life. Now, during your course of time, while you are in the universe, there are a few incidents which define a certain before and a certain after. And while you're on the threshold of this before and after is when life is actually happening. And people don't tell you how difficult 7th grade can get at times. 7th grade is actually really difficult. You're dealing with a completely new curriculum. You're dealing with a period for the first time. You're dealing with confessing to a crush for the first time. But the most difficult of them all, dealing with the death of a parent. Now, most of us will have to face the death of a parent, but only a few are actually prepared for it. I lost my father in 2011 when I was 13, and I honestly wasn't ready for such a drastic change in my life. Honestly, no one is. And back in 2011, no one is talking about mental health issues. And before you're supposed to be made aware of how you're supposed to deal with it, how you're supposed to cope with it, what exactly has happened and what this change exactly means in your life, you're actually supposed to be strong. You're supposed to be super strong and set an example for the people around you and for your family. So during that course of displaying my strength and putting it out as an exhibit, my brain factory went out of order. And my brain cells went on a strike and they asked me, listen, Ankita, figure what's going on and then we'll get back to you. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take my time and I'm going to figure out what's happening. And trust me, I'm still trying to figure out what's happening. So during this journey of getting to deal with such a drastic change in my life, I have realized that inspiration has beautiful ways of making its way back into your life. To quote one of the pieces I wrote for him, "Your memory rents my chest for a day or two, makes a mess and leaves me weak, and takes away a fraction of me with no notice. I have never reported it for theft, Father. I will never do. I just wish someone cleaned up this mess. I just wish it hurt a little less." Now, poetry gave me a platform that no other art form has been able to do so. I remember words being my only escape when I couldn't figure out what was happening, when I couldn't express what I was feeling. All I knew was I just had this feeling in my chest and it had to erupt someday. And for when I look back at all that I've written, I'm so glad it did. My artistic expression then took turns. From writing, it went to designing. Then I started adding color to my ideas. I started adding dialogue and then translating them into something I can talk about today. Now, our artistic expression is often confused between what is supposed to be a certain standard of art style that already exists. But in reality, our artistic expression is actually supposed to set us free. Especially in an environment that is bound by so many limitations. It is bound by work desks, it is bound by 9-to-5 jobs, it is bound by taxes. Our creative expression is actually what is supposed to set us free. Which brings me to the most important chapter and the concern in a millennial's life today. Getting a damn job. Today I will be talking about the story of how higher Ankita Chawla was born. And I'll walk you through the journey of the obstacles I had and how the response came out to be. Now, I remember I was in my last semester with my friends. All of them had gotten back from their internships. And everyone is talking about, these are the places we interned at. We're going to be working at these places. They're talking about the cities they're going to stay in, the people they're going to room with. And I hadn't even made a baby step to contribute to that conversation. And at that very moment, I felt so jobless, literally jobless. And I was mindlessly scrolling through my Instagram feed, which is when I had my eureka moment. Like, if you were there in the classroom, you would have seen a light bulb over my head. I'm not kidding. So I realized that, okay, you know what? I will reach out to my employers when they're looking for talent and not when they're actually looking for an employee in their mailbox. Which is why I chose Instagram as a platform to reach out and actually put my personality on display as a CV, as an Instagram account. And Instagram as a community has been so conducive for artists to grow. I remember I joined the platform in 2013. And since then, it has evolved so much. It has so much art to share, to learn from, and to take inspiration from. The volume is insane. And the reason why I chose Instagram was because the fact that in order to show a complete picture, bit by bit, post by post, grid by grid, is what could be done best on Instagram. So that very day, I go back to my hostel and I start sketching out the entire idea. And 6 hours of designing, 6 hours of sketching, in fact, translated into 60 hours of designing, accompanied by an obnoxious amount of coffee and no sleep. And definitely, I would like to admit that my end product was very different from the sketch that I had designed earlier. But the entire journey of learning through those entire 60 hours, and learning not in terms of something philosophical, learning simply in terms of teaching myself the craft, teaching myself the software, the light, the shadow, the shape, the curve. And this is how I believe everyone can learn and grow in the craft that they're practicing. The fact that you do not care as much about what the end product is, but focus on actually finishing your idea. Because an idea once initiated is 50% complete. The rest 50%, the onus is on you to finish that. And I remember when I put Hire Ankita Chawla out, my friends were kind enough to share that the moment I put it out. And in fact, some of them are sitting right here. So thank you so much. And it got a response that I had never expected. I had never expected it to turn into this entire personal branding campaign and to reach a stage it has today. I knew what I was doing was going to be a misfit because something like that had never been done before. And it was definitely different from all the CVs that go out to employers, go out to companies in search of employment. I knew for a fact that it could be an idea that would be laughed at. And like, okay, what is this? It's actually an entire personality on an Instagram resume. Like, employers will do a social media check on you no matter like how much you try to conceal it. My idea was, I'm going to serve it to them on a platter. And it eventually worked out for me. The most amusing bit about this entire experience was that you expect employment to knock on your doorstep in a nice suit and tie, in a formal PDF letter, and offering you the job. But I actually had this Fortune 500 company sliding into my DMs and actually offering me the job. I'm like, okay, this is peak millennial culture. This is how it happens today. So that was fun, and right now I'm working with a very reputed Big Four, which I always wanted to work with, which brings me to a very important conversation that I want to have with you guys today. How does creativity survive in a corporate? Now, this is a very challenging conversation I have dared to have with myself and the people around me today over the course of past 3 months. It is something that I have tested my waters in and also tried to figure out how I can adapt best to give the results that at least I expect out of myself. Now, we can look at your career in this way. There are two forces competing for your attention. One is your creative satisfaction and one is your source of income. You are the prize in the middle. This is one way to look at it. The other way is, if this is your source of income, superimposed with your creative satisfaction, the intersection you derive out of it is actually the effort you put in to keep your creativity alive. And that's exactly what I need to emphasize on today, and I want to emphasize on today, is that you need to let those ideas flow. Your inner critic is lying to you most of the times. Every time you think, oh my God, no, the other person did it that way and I could have done it better, just shut that critic down and let your ideas flow, because even if you have these ideas that are coming up to you throughout the day, keep writing them down. Because once you look back at them with a fresh perspective, these ideas are going to look much better. All in all, is what I'm going to say is that your ideas can be prone to failure, but it doesn't mean that it stops or hinders your creative process. Because the fact that there is an uncertainty that our creative ideas get along, the fact that there is no right or wrong way to do things is what gives birth to diversity. And you need to encash on that. You need to capitalize on the fact that there is no such thing as set in stone for a creative idea to be correct. It's your idea, it's your baby, nurture it, let it grow, and don't shut it down. In conclusion, I'd like to tell you all that the maximum share of voice you have in your life in terms of who you listen to the most is you. So make sure you're saying some kind and sweet stuff to yourself in your head. And always remember that not everything has to make sense, but it eventually will. Just keep moving, keep creating, and you will end up connecting the dots. I am Ankita Chawla, and thanks for coming to my TEDx talk.